Kubrick's The Shining unfolds less like a typical horror film and more like a labyrinth of meaning and imagery. The Overlook is littered with repeating patterns, on carpets, walls, and in visual motifs, encouraging the audience to get lost in them. Paradoxically, Kubrick stages this horror not in shadow but in plain sight. Decades before Midsommar 2019 made terror out of constant daylight, The Shining unfolded in fully lit spaces, gleaming kitchens, hotel rooms, wide hallways, and cavernous ballrooms. Every detail is visible, yet the film refuses to tell us which ones matter. That openness is both fascinating and infuriating. Kubrick forces his audience to do the work, to sift through the excess of information without guidance, a demand at odds with the more conventional horror films of the era that handed viewers neatly packaged scares. As Roger Luckhurst put it, the film sits uneasily as high art and low culture, subversive yet utterly contained, seemingly destined to please no one. When The Shining finally premiered in 1980, it came on the heels of a long marketing push and endless press coverage of its extended shoot. At the time, critics were wary of directors who seemed to vanish into bloated productions, burning through budgets and schedules. That same year saw the release of Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate, a legendary disaster that soured studios on the idea of giving auteurs unlimited freedom. Against that backdrop, Kubrick's horror film was viewed with suspicion. The promotion didn't help. Months of trailers had teased images like the elevator doors gushing blood, while Kubrick boldly claimed he had crafted the scariest movie ever made. Expectations were sky high, and critics pushed back. Sight and Sound dismissed it as a trivial project, while Pauline Kael criticized in The New Yorker that Kubrick's obsession with technical perfection created an emotional distance. Kubrick himself seemed restless with the film even after its release. The original cut ran 146 minutes, but he trimmed it down almost immediately. Within weeks of the US premiere, he snipped 2 minutes, an alternate ending where Ullman visits Wendy in the hospital and tells her Jack's body was never recovered. Before the London opening, he cut a further 25 minutes, losing the Sidewinder doctor scene, some of Jack's cruel remarks to Wendy, and several supernatural beats from the back half of the film. In this sense, Kubrick resembled King himself, who often revisits ideas across short stories and novels. Both creators were compulsive reworkers, unwilling to see a project as final even once it had already entered the world. Kubrick's habit of revising his work even after it had already been released suggests that The Shining was a film discovered in the act of making, rather than one built entirely from a preordained blueprint, as some fans insist. Yet if the movie has a unifying thread, it may lie in Kubrick's use of imagery as a kind of labyrinth, weaving together references from fairy tales, pop culture, myth, and history for the attentive viewer to pass. One sequence illustrates this layering perfectly. Jack hunts Wendy and Danny through their quarters, axe in hand. Bursting in, he calls out, "Wendy, I'm home," echoing Desi Arnaz's famous catchphrase from I Love Lucy. As Wendy and Danny retreat into the bathroom, Jack hams it up as the big bad wolf, growling, little pigs, let me come in." Moments later, he smashes through the door with the now iconic line, "Here's Johnny!" lifted straight from Johnny Carson's Tonight Show introduction. The clash between sitcom comfort and domestic terror produces a queasy blend of humor and horror, both familiar and grotesque. These kinds of jarring cultural mashups recur throughout the film, making it easy to believe Kubrick planted them deliberately. By the same logic, even the Overlook's illogical architecture may be more than a byproduct of set construction. Its shifting, impossible layout mirrors the Gothic tradition's emphasis on disorientation, making the hotel itself part of the film's unnerving maze. After all of its eerie references and unresolved puzzles, The Shining closes on a note of pure ambiguity, leaving audiences unsettled long after the credits roll. In a series of slow dissolves, the final images linger on a wall of vintage photographs. There, in a snapshot from the Overlook's July 4th ball in 1921, stands Jack, smiling at the camera as though he's always belonged. The moment echoes Grady's chilling insistence. "You are the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker. I should know, sir. I've always been here. What does this ending mean? Has Jack been absorbed into the Overlook, claimed by its supernatural history? Perhaps his already fragile mind, crippled by alcoholism, depression, and writer's block, was simply hollowed out by the hotel until nothing remained. His earlier line, "I'd give my goddamn soul for just a glass of beer," suggests a moment of surrender, an acceptance of possession. Or maybe he is doomed to relive this nightmare forever, trapped in a cycle of violence and madness. Some viewers have even speculated about the mysterious paper Jack clutches in the photograph, partially obscured by another man's hand. Does it read, "Help me? Let me out"? The irony is that any definitive answer may be beside the point. The ending itself was partly shaped by circumstance. A massive fire destroyed the Colorado lounge set, costing $2.5 million and eliminating the possibility of shooting an alternative climax. Had the set survived, Kubrick might have opted for something closer to King's novel, in which the Overlook explodes from neglected boilers. Instead, we're left with a haunting final tableau that resists closure, perfectly in keeping with the rest of the film. Open to endless speculation, yet refusing to resolve. The Shining is a riddle without resolution, and at its core, the perfect metaphor for that enigma is the hedge maze. Kubrick replaced King's living topiary animals, an idea he found too absurd, with a geometric labyrinth, and he reportedly once became lost inside it himself after crew members dared him to enter. The director had long been fascinated by the myth of the Minotaur, the half-man beast trapped in the labyrinth of Crete, and Jack Torrance takes on that role within the film. In one striking sequence, Kubrick frames Jack looming over the miniature model of the maze before dissolving to an aerial view of the real hedge, where Wendy and Danny wander below, Jack as monster, Danny as prey. The parallels continue. Danny can be read as a Theseus figure, luring the Minotaur into the maze only to trap him there in death. Even Danny's television habits play into this symbolic game. He repeatedly watches Roadrunner cartoons, and his nickname Doc recalls Bugs Bunny's trademark line, "What's up, Doc?" Both characters are famous for outwitting their pursuers, Bugs dodging Elmer Fudd, the Roadrunner escaping Wile E. Coyote. In that light, Danny's survival strategy in the hedge maze mirrors the slapstick cunning of his cartoon heroes. At the same time, this reading illustrates how easily interpretation can spiral outward. A single scene can lead to connections spanning from Greek mythology to Looney Tunes, and while each link may feel logical, it's impossible to know if Kubrick intended any of it. The film practically invites this stretching of detail into conjecture, offering patterns that seem meaningful but never quite resolve. In many ways, Kubrick turns the audience of The Shining into a version of Jack himself, a figure consumed, emptied, and refilled by the Overlook's endless stimuli. Here, the stimuli are cinematic. Images, sounds, symbols, and patterns carefully arranged by Kubrick to lure the spectator into an obsessive cycle of interpretation. The film overwhelms with so many contexts and possible readings that it risks burying the most important point. Kubrick's true mastery lies in how he manipulates his viewers. Like Jack, we're caught in a loop. He feels both at home in the Overlook and as though he's been there before. "We all have moments of déjà vu," he remarks. But this was ridiculous. Viewers experience something similar, returning to The Shining again and again, convinced its secrets will eventually give way. They never do. The film's details don't add up to a single definitive meaning. Instead, they form a shifting labyrinth, where moments feel familiar yet always escape intellectual closure. That is what makes The Shining so haunting. Its horror doesn't come only from axes, ghosts, or mazes, but from the way Kubrick has ensnared us in a cinematic trap, a puzzle that can never be solved, a nightmare that compels endless revisiting. The film endures because its meaning is never fixed, terrifying precisely because it is ours to invent and never fully to grasp.